All right, let's talk about EVO. Back in 2020, the biggest fighting game tournament on the planet pretty much imploded overnight. I mean, publishers were pulling out, sponsors just vanished, the brand became totally toxic. But the thing is, the real story here isn't just about a scandal. It's about the very foundation EVO was built on, and how that foundation made what happened next not just possible, but, maybe even inevitable.
And yeah, that quote really gets to the heart of what we're digging into today. See, the 2020 crisis, that wasn't the disease. It was just the symptom. What it did was expose this really deep structural vulnerability, a kind of fragility that had been hiding in plain sight for years. And that's what ultimately paved the way for a corporate takeover to look less like a buyout and more like a rescue mission.
So that brings us to the big question for this whole explainer. How did the fighting game community's absolute crown jewel, something built on pure passion and trust, turn into a corporate property, something that could literally be bought and sold on the open market? Well, to figure that out, we've got to peel back the layers and look at its business history.
Okay, so let's rewind. To really understand how EVO could even be sold, you first have to get the completely unique, almost, magical way the original event was built. This was not your typical company, not by a long shot. It was something else entirely. In the very beginning, EVO was basically built by 4 guys, and each one brought something essential to the table. First, you had Tom and Tony Cannon. These were the tech brains, the computer scientists who built the digital backbone, like Shoryuken.com, which was huge for connecting all these scattered local scenes. Then you had Seth Killian, the ultimate community insider. His involvement gave the event instant street cred with the players. And finally, there was Joey Coella, the operator. He was the logistical wizard who somehow wrangled the chaos and actually made the tournaments happen.
So you gotta wonder, how did this tiny team manage to run a massive, growing international event? Well, insiders actually had a nickname for it, Wizard Magic, which came from Joey's tag, Mr. Wizard. And it basically describes a system that ran on pure trust. We're talking handshake deals with big publishers, personal relationships that were built over years, and, this is the really critical part, a financial model that was funded by player registration fees. They needed that money months in advance just to pay for the event itself. And hey, it worked. As long as everyone kept believing in the system, the magic kept happening.
And for years, that machine just kept on growing. I mean, what started as Battle by the Bay way back in '96 became the first official EVO in 2002. Then, by 2006, you get Capcom's official stamp of approval, and suddenly it's the central stage for the entire industry. But the real game changer, that came in the mid-2010s with the move to Las Vegas. This wasn't just a change of scenery. This was EVO transforming into a massive, global event property. And the stakes got so much higher.
But here's the thing. As EVO got bigger and bigger, that informal, trust-based structure, it started to stretch. It was stretched to its absolute breaking point. That wizard magic that allowed it to grow so fast, it was also becoming its single greatest weakness. You could feel it. The machine was starting to shake.
And this is where you can really see the pressure building. On one hand, look at what EVO had become on the outside. A global phenomenon, right? Thousands of players, huge Vegas venues, coverage on ESPN, multi-million-dollar budgets. But on the inside, it was still being run by this shockingly small core team. In fact, the founders themselves said it hit an inflection point. They called it everyone's favorite borrowed time side project. Think about that. That is a huge and really dangerous gap between perception and reality.
And this is the legal detail that makes everything else possible. See, EVO wasn't just an event. Behind the scenes, it was a legal company called Triple Perfect Inc., with the founders as its officers. Think of it like a box, and inside that box were all of EVO's real assets. The brand name, the publisher relationships, the broadcasting rights, and this is the key takeaway right here. You can't sell a community, you can't sell a vibe, but you can absolutely 100% sell the assets held inside a corporate shell.
And then in July 2020, that fragile structure didn't just crack, it completely detonated. Really serious allegations came out against CEO Joey Coella, the guy who was the central operator of the entire machine. And just like that, the trust that the whole wizard magic model was built on, it just vanished instantly.
The fallout from a business perspective was immediate, and it was absolutely catastrophic. It was like total organ failure for the company. Publishers, Capcom, Bandai Namco, NetherRealm, they all pulled out. Sponsors bailed. The online event got canceled. That whole forward confidence model shattered. And the company's central operator, its CEO, was gone. The old machine wasn't just damaged anymore, it was completely and totally broken.
Okay, so this is where the story pivots. The next chapter isn't about growth or just getting bigger. No, the next move was framed very specifically as a rescue mission. The goal was to stabilize what was still a very valuable brand, but one that was now a critically damaged asset. And here it is. In March of 2021, the announcement drops. Sony Interactive Entertainment and a new esports venture called RTS are jointly acquiring EVO's assets. Not the community, remember, but the assets from Triple Perfect Inc. This was the moment it all changed. Control of the FGC's crown jewel officially left the founders' hands and moved into a new corporate joint venture. So, let's be clear about what this acquisition really meant. It was a total collision of two different worlds. You have the old EVO, run like a passion project on handshake deals and gut feelings. And now you have the new EVO, run like a managed corporate property, with org charts, formal processes, and long-term strategy. That shift, that was the real price of survival. So, what's the very first order of business for the new corporate owners? Well, you gut the old, informal wizard magic structure, and you build a formal, professional management layer on top of it. One that's designed to run the event like the major global business it had actually become. And the new structure they built was actually pretty clever. It was multi-layered. See, on the ground floor, they brought in respected FGC veterans, guys like Rick Theo from Combo Breaker and Mark Julio, to run operations and keep that community trust. But then, above them, you had the new executive layer from RTS, people like Stuart Saw, who had serious corporate esports and live event experience from places like Twitch and Endeavor. They even went a step further and absorbed another community pillar by hiring Alex Jabali, the founder of CEO.
Now, once EVO was stabilized and professionalized with this brand new structure, something really fundamental changed about what it was. It wasn't just a tournament anymore. It was now a clean, well-managed, tradable asset. And what happens with assets? Well, they get traded.
And this timeline just perfectly illustrates what happens next. It's an ownership carousel, and it spins fast. Just look at this. March 2021, Sony and RTS buy in. Less than 2 years later, Sony's out, selling its stake to an Indian esports firm, Nodwin Gaming. Then, fast forward to 2025, and the whole picture changes again. Saudi Arabia's Qiddiya investment company acquires RTS, making them a co-owner. And then, just a few months after that, they buy out Nodwin's stake to take 100% control. The community's jewel was now just another asset, being passed between huge global companies.
So, after all of that shuffling, it leads to the obvious question: who really runs EVO today? The answer isn't so simple anymore. It reveals this whole new chain of command that sits many, many layers above the tournament floor that we all see and love.
And this chart really lays out the new power ladder. It's worth taking a second to look at this. At the very bottom, level 1, you've got the on-the-ground event team, the familiar faces the community knows, like Rick Theo and Mark Julio. Okay, but one level up, you have the operator, which is the corporate leadership at RTS. Then go up another level to the strategists, the execs at Qiddiya Investment Company. And then, at the very top, level 4, that's the capital. We're talking sovereign-backed leadership, folks with backgrounds in global investment banking. That is a long, long way from 4 founders in a room at UCLA.
And ultimately, this quote really cuts right to the heart of the whole thing. For us, the crowd, EVO is all about the parries, the pop-offs, the unforgettable moments. But the business history, it tells a totally different story. The contracts, they don't remember the hype. They remember who was holding the debt, who was facing the liabilities, and who stepped in to take all that risk off the table.
And that leaves us with this one final, really tough question. Was this corporate transformation the only way for an event of this size to survive a disaster and keep growing? Or was this the exact moment that the fighting game community, a scene built entirely from the ground up, officially stopped owning its own future? And that is the real story, the real legacy of EVO's transformation.